Hi, everyone, and welcome back to On the DL. We are joined today with Ashley Waxman Bakshi. Ashley, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
And I love that we are on a 7 hour time difference, you and I. I'm in Canada, you're in Israel.
Yeah,
That's
but
so
we
nice
made it
of
work.
you. We did make it work. We were going back and forth and trying to find a time, but this was like a real time change for us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
How,
late enough that my kids are already sleeping, so
how many
I'm
kids
good.
do you have?
I have four kids.
And what is the age range?
So it's 9, 7, 5, and 4. I have my
You're
hands full.
Yeah, you're tired. You're like, but it's 9:30 p.m. here. So they're sleeping and I've got my evening now, which is great,
Exactly,
which is nice. And
exactly.
you're going to spend it with me, which I'm so complimented because I've been following you for a long time. You are so knowledgeable, but now so inspirational. Your advocacy work moves me every single
Thank you.
day. I am moved by you. And not just because you are a fellow Jewish woman, but because you are a woman. And I just love how fair you are, how smart you are, and that when you are putting out information as part of your advocacy, it is all factual stuff. Like you are backing everything up. You're not just throwing stuff out into the wild universe, out there. Like we're seeing so much shit out there right now. It's very hard to decipher. You don't do that. So how do you go about doing what you do?
Okay, so I'll begin by saying that you pointed out that I'm a woman. I think if we look all across the internet right now, the majority of the people being very active are mostly women.
Hmm.
um and I think it shows a lot about us as a gender. um we're really, it's really important for us, like justice. I mean, for me specifically, I'm also a Libra, so for me, like deep in my heart, justice. Are you a Libra as well?
Oh, I see. I'm telling you, we're bonded October what?
15th.
5th.
Well, we still have a number in common.
Yeah.
But yeah, so justice is really important for us Libras, and for women, I think in general. And when people like that question, when you just asked me about like how do I, how is it also factual? It's because when you have good on your side, you don't need to make anything up. You just stick to the facts, and and you're good. And so that's pretty much what I do. A lot of the videos, I mean, a lot of people don't know this about me. But I have my master's degree was in counterterrorism, and specifically my thesis was on the radical and fundamental ideologies of radical Islam. And so I actually am knowledgeable on that topic.
Wow. I did
But
not know that.
I know
I
most
didn't know.
people wouldn't. It's not something that I people know me, either people have started following me over the past, I would say, 2 years, since I've started doing more like pro-Israel stuff online. But for the past 12 years, I've been doing beauty and fashion content mostly. And so I never really felt the need to like say what my master's degree in, because it had nothing to do with it. And just recently have I been starting to bring it out, because when I talk about extreme and radical ideology of Islam, obviously I'm getting, shamed on and called Islamophobic. And so
Hmm.
when I can back that up with like, this is my academic studies, this is not just my opinion about Islamism, but this is, real stuff, then it helps me, because I think what a lot of people don't understand is Islamophobia means you don't like Muslims. But when you are opposed the radical fundamental ideology of Islamism, it's not the same thing. It's not that you're opposed the religion, it's that you're opposed the idea that Islam needs to take over violently through jihad the entire world and impose its Sharia law on the entire world. So it's very, very different than somebody who is a Muslim, prays 5 times a day, practices
Yeah.
the religion in a peaceful way. Two very, very different things. And unfortunately, we're starting to see, I mean, they've always been very separate. And we've always heard the majority of the Muslim community around the world really condemn anti-Semitism and say, you know, this is not Islam. Islam is a religion of peace. But over the past 2 months, we haven't really been hearing those calls, and so things are kind of starting to get meshed, and we don't know anymore, like, what is peaceful Islam and what is radical Islamism anymore. So
I haven't heard the word Islamism before.
yeah, I
I
mean,
haven't heard that before.
so
Um,
basically, it's if we see, you know, just to make it as simple as possible for people who are not, you know, deep into the nuances like I am, but if we see the difference between countries such as Saudi Arabia as a whole, who have actually been making a lot of progress over the few years, you know, it used to be that women weren't allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia. That's no longer true. And then if we compare that to the radical Islamic regime of Iran, um, that's the difference. It's like the theocracy stoning women for being, you know, promiscuous or honor
mhm.
killings, you know, so that's the difference.
So tell me a little bit about you, because as I just mentioned, you are living in Israel, but you are Canadian. You spent most of your life in Canada until you decided to move to Israel to join the Israeli Defense Force, or you had moved prior and then joined the IDF?
No, I moved during the Second Lebanon War to volunteer to the IDF. I ended up enlisting to the Israel Air Force. So I was in the Air Force for 5 years. I became an officer.
Wow.
And that's when I did my master's degree also while I was in the military or Air Force, I should say. And from there, I moved to work in the Ministry of Defense. So I worked in defense also. And then while I was working in the Ministry of Defense, I just opened up a YouTube channel and started doing beauty videos because I thought it was fun and loved it. So it was just a hobby at first. Um, I moved to Israel when I was 21 years old. I've been here now for 17 years, so it's kind of, I can't believe I'm almost at the point where it's like the same amount of time that I've been in Canada and
Yes.
been in Israel.
Mhm.
When I'm in Israel, I feel Canadian. When I'm in Canada, I feel Israeli.
Really?
Yeah, because in
Wow.
in Israel, I'm really, you know, compared to everyone, I'm really polite and I'm really patient and I'm like politically correct. And then when I come to Canada, my friends are like, "Oh my God, you're so rude and impatient." So yeah.
You know, I spent quite a bit of time in Israel myself in my youth or my younger years, I would say. And I'm always fascinated when I meet a woman, particularly a woman who has made Aliyah and made the decision to move and make her life in Israel. I was this close to it, which most people don't know that about me. Most people have met me in my adult life and don't realize that in my late teens, early 20s, I was madly in love with somebody in Israel. And it was the Gulf War that freaked me the fuck out. I freaked out where I thought, I don't know if I can live here. I don't know if I
Yeah.
could do this. And I
Yeah.
just wonder what my life would have been like had I gone back. I had fallen in love with the kibbutznik, and I'm sure you know the kibbutz Devoker in the Negev, very
Yeah.
close
It's the
to
safest place in Israel today.
what, the Negev? Is
Yeah,
it?
of
You've
course, because nobody
mm,
sends rockets to the Negev. It's just not worth it for them. So yeah, it's the safest place in Israel.
really? Well,
Yeah.
it'll be nice on my next trip. That's where I'll be visiting for sure. Um, yeah, and I just didn't go back.
I mean, I
And
can say that I can understand that there's a little bit of an age difference between us, which I never would have
yes, for
guessed,
sure.
but
Oh,
just
thanks.
never would have
Yeah.
guessed. But just from you seeing the Gulf War, so to kind of give
Yes.
me perspective a little
Hmm.
bit. But
Hmm.
I can say that when I was in my late teens, that's when it was the second Intifada, and
Hmm.
I was scared. You know, I didn't come visit Israel during the second Intifada when buses were blowing up. And I
Hmm.
actually, towards the end of the second Intifada, my brother actually, he's quite a bit older than me. He's 13 years older than me. He made Aliyah. In the meantime, he got married and moved back to Canada. So he's in Canada now. But when he made Aliyah, I was a teen. And towards the end of the Intifada, I went to visit him. And I got on a bus to go up north to a small town called Afula, if you've ever heard of it, in the north.
Of course.
And
Mhm.
I had like, we had like family friends there. So I was on my way there to visit. And I was really nervous about getting on this bus. I really didn't want to. I didn't want to take a bus, but it's a long way. It's like 2 hours. I couldn't get my brother to take me. Anyways, I get on this bus and I'm on my way and I'm about 20 minutes into the ride and I'm like, just my heart is pounding and like you're looking at every single person getting on the bus, right? And you're like ready to jump off. And then my brother calls me and he goes, I just got asked from work to like go up to Haifa so I can get off the bus wherever you are. I'll come pick you up and I'll take you up north. And I got off the bus and that very same bus down the road, like maybe like a 10-minute drive from where I got off, exploded when it reached a bus stop. Yeah, at Summit Betlid, and many soldiers were killed in that terror attack. And I was on that bus, and I was, and ever since that day, I I knew that no matter what, I'd be okay. Like I just had that feeling that if I was,
Wow.
yeah, it's just quite a story.
Wow.
But I knew I'd be okay. And then after that, I wasn't afraid to come back to Israel ever again. And I would always come visit. And even today, I mean, there are still these incidents, especially now, everything's very, very tense right now. I was at Ichilov at the hospital in Tel Aviv visiting injured soldiers just last week. And I was standing outside talking on the phone, and a young, Arab looking guy comes walking towards me, and you automatically, it's a shame to say it. And normally on an everyday basis, I don't think that anymore. It's just because, I think it was the day after there was also the terrorist attack in Jerusalem, and
Mhm.
everything's just really, really tense right now. And when things are tense, you get nervous. Like you see there's certain figures that you see, or there's certain people, or you're walking down the street and you get in this mode where you start thinking, what if I do if this guy's like, pulls out a knife? What do you do? Like where's the first place I run to? And the way like I get over my fear is I smile at the people. And then if they smile back, then I know we're good. So I
Mm.
smile, and it's like a way to calm myself down, because if not, it's you can really be like I suffer from anxiety anyways, just like half of this world, but you can really be anxious all the time. I went down to Yafo to interview, and I was nervous, and I parked like right close to the beach, and everything's like open parking lot, and it went through my head. I was like, what if there's a siren right now? Where do I go? Do I lay down on the
Right.
ground, or do I go behind that building? It's like everywhere you go, you're thinking in the back of my mind, like, what's my plan if something happens? And that's something that I don't think Canadians can understand, because you just walk down the street in Canada, you don't think about what if.
So I was going to ask you, what's the vibe right now in Israel? I know things have changed dramatically over the last couple of weeks to where they were 6 weeks ago, with the release of some of the hostages. There was a little bit of a sigh, and then right back into this
Yeah,
feeling
that,
of,
yeah, absolutely. So I would explain it like this. The first week was complete shock.
Mhm,
The second week was fear. We were all in fear that the world that we were going into World War III. That was our
mhm.
fear. Like it was right away. What about Iran? What about Hezbollah? What about this? And then we went into this deep, deep state of sadness when it all kind of sunk in. And we started to see, the numbers and the soldiers starting to die also, because the operation was already beginning. And then we did get this a little bit of relief when we started to see hostages coming back. Um, I have a cousin who's a hostage still in Gaza. She's 19 years old. Her name is Agam Belgel.
I'm so
And
sorry.
this is our country. And for me, that week when we were happy, it was just such a complicated feeling, because on the one hand, you're so happy when you see these children released. On the other hand, you're thinking about all the other people who are getting left behind, and especially like that feeling that the world just doesn't care. And then now we're kind of in a state where everyone's kind of like almost like zombies walking down the
Mhm.
street. It's Hanukkah, we're supposed to be happy. People are like trying to be happy. We can't act, nobody's happy. I can't bring myself to smile, laugh. I'm not able to go see a movie. I'm not able. My husband's all the time. He's like, "We want to go to like out to eat." I was like, I can't. I'm still grieving. We're all grieving. And there isn't one home that hasn't been affected. I have three cousins, soldiers who were killed. My husband's first cousin was at the Nova Music Festival, was killed. He was so badly, I don't want to bring this up again and again, but he was so badly mutilated that it took 2.5 weeks to recognize his DNA on like a piece of metal, and that's all that was could buried. Like they couldn't even find a body. It was also burned and chopped, and so it's really, really, really hard. And today specifically was a really difficult day because we've had 10 soldiers die yesterday in one operation. So it's just, and also the deeper we go into the military operation, the more bodies they're finding of hostages. And so people who did have hope that their hostages are alive, or slowly we're discovering that more and more have not only, and this is how wicked and evil they are. It's not that they were killed, a day ago because they knew that the forces were approaching. It's that these bodies have been lying there for 2 months. And
Yeah.
it's,
Mhm.
and
It's wicked.
it is. And
It's evil.
every single person in this country is with PTSD right now. Every single
Hmm.
person. My son, we hear the drones. If, by the way, this microphone's so good, you might be able to hear them. Not
Oh,
right now, but
wow.
when they come back, you might be able to hear them. There's drones in the air. There's fighter jets in the air all the time. Every time a fighter jet goes by, my 5-year-old runs to me, "Mommy, what was that noise? What was that noise?" Today I had to go take one of my daughter to pick up her glasses, and I left my oldest and my son at home, and they called me like, "We went down to the bomb shelter." And I'm like, "Why? There was no siren. I didn't hear a siren." They were like, "We heard booms. We heard booms. There's a terrorist trying to break into our home." So we locked all the doors and we went down to the bomb shelter. Like every child is PTSD. And my kids, I really, really heavily protected them. I didn't want them, I made sure they didn't see any of those atrocities. And I didn't tell them, they don't know that we have a cousin who's hostage. I didn't tell them at first even about the hostage situation because I just tried to protect them. I didn't want them to know. I mean, sirens, obviously, I couldn't because they heard it. But actually, the first place my 9-year-old understood that there were hostages was when we were in Toronto, and she saw the kidnap signs, and she can read
Hmm.
English, and she was like, Mommy, is this kid from Israel? Like kidnapped? Why does it say kidnapped?" So eventually I had to tell her. And it was kind of ironic that in Canada is when she discovered it.
And so you were here on October 7th?
No, no, I was in Israel. We were in
Okay.
Israel. And about 6 or 7 days after, I just felt very, very useless. We
Hmm.
were in the house. We didn't leave our house for about 6 days. Well, until I left, we didn't leave our house because the first few days we also were convinced that there were still terrorists roaming the whole country. We didn't know how far
Well,
north
that's what
they
we
made
heard.
it.
That's what
Right.
that's
No
what we
one,
heard. Yeah.
no one knew.
Hmm.
So we didn't leave our house. And then obviously with the sirens all the time. So we didn't leave the house so that we could stay close to the bomb shelter. And then at a certain point, I was just, I had invited actually that. So it happened on a Saturday. And then on the Tuesday, I invited influencers to come over to my house, and we made like a lot of content together and stuff like that. And I remember just looking from the side and being like, okay, there's a lot of people making content out of Israel right now. I need to be doing more. Like the first week, I'm sure you've heard about it, but every Israeli started volunteering with something. Like everybody
Hmm.
was like making sandwiches for soldiers or donating to the people who have been displaced. And I was like, what can I do to make, to make people feel better? And so I wanted to go and make people happy. And I have a beauty line. So I wanted to give them products, and I wanted to, come and just meet them. And everywhere I went, they were like, "Ashley, it's too soon. These people cannot, they don't want
Hmm.
visitors. They don't want to talk beauty. They don't want to smile. They want to grieve." And I realized at that point that what I should be doing is I should be abroad talking for Israel. And so I took my kids because obviously you don't leave your 4 kids at home in a war and, and leave. So I took them with
Right.
me, and we left. We left on the very next day. I bought a ticket, the first ticket I could find, and we just left to the first flight that I could find to wherever. And that flight was to Nice, to the south of France. And we were there for 6 days. I spoke in a few synagogues, and then from there I continued to Paris, where I met with students and with organizations. And then from there, I continued in France. It was awful. It was a nightmare. It was just so bad. And for me, there was one moment where somebody stopped me on the street and she was like, well, you know, with a strong French accent, she was like, oh, I love what you do and thank you. And I am Jewish. And I was like, oh my God, it's amazing. And I was with my kids on the street. And at the same moment, I was like, if she recognized me, then the other side might too. And that's when I started to feel very, very unsafe.
Right. Right.
And yeah, and France, I mean, it's not my home. You could argue that there's the same amount of anti-Semitism and hate in Canada probably than in France. I don't know. I can't really speak for the statistics, but the second we came to Canada, I felt just safer because I was with my brother and I felt at home and I know the area and I know where to go. And so I was doing a lot of speaking events. I don't know if you saw in Toronto and in
I
Montreal.
did. I saw all of them.
Yeah, it
I
was
did.
amazing. It was really, really, really amazing. And I can also say that I was really proud at that moment to be Canadian because the Jewish community in Canada is so connected to Israel. And I really felt the difference coming from France because I felt like in Paris specifically, like the Jewish community, they make this really big differentiation between what it like being Jewish and their connection to Israel. And
Hmm.
obviously, knowing our history, we can't separate that. I mean, Zionism is an integral part of Judaism, and we are an ethno religion. We're not just a religion. And in Canada, I really felt it. It's like people who've never even been to Israel were crying, you know, over the things I was sharing. And so I was very proud. Today, I was a little bit less proud to be Canadian, as I told you, as you saw in my story. Um,
I want to talk to you about politics, but I
yeah,
want to touch upon this idea of Jew hate. I mean, there's
yeah,
anti-Semitism and then there is Jew hate. And I don't know about you because you've been living in Israel for so long. In some ways, I feel that it's almost bubbled, but I know that there's anti-Semitism everywhere. I've felt it my whole life. I've had microaggressions. I've felt it at every work environment I've ever been to. But this level of where we are at is above and beyond debilitating. The shock, it is, I don't know if it's the same for you because you're in Israel right now, but even in my friends and family in Israel have actually said, I'm so sorry for what you're going through because we don't have that here. It's different. We worry about our house being blown up. We worry about being stabbed, killed on the street, but you can't even walk downtown. You can't even, your kids can't even go to school. You know, you can't wear your Jewish star, your kippahs. You can't. I'm like it. You know, I'm getting apologies from Israelis, which is very funny.
I know
Um,
it's funny that you're saying that because I get asked all the time on my lives, do I think it's more dangerous to be a Jew abroad or in Israel today? And I can say from my perspective, I still think it's safer to be a Jew abroad. When you're abroad, you can, you know, if you're not somebody who's well known or somebody who's known to be in the community, or if you're not coming back from a protest or a rally with a flag in your hand, you could walk down the street and nobody would guess you're Jewish. Um, so there is an element of how you can protect yourself physically from violent hate crimes. Whereas in Israel, doesn't matter what I'm going to do, I can't protect myself. If a rocket is going to fall on my house, it's going to fall on my house.
right.
If I'm, you know, standing on the street, I could get stabbed or shot. That's our reality. We are actually in fear of getting nuked by Iran. Like it's different. I'm not in any way belittling the feeling of anti-Semitism. I definitely know what it feels like. And for me as well, when I was on university campus 20 years ago, I felt anti-Semitism. I
Yeah.
think
I
the
mean,
I
it
think
was
the big
there, right? You were
difference,
at York, right?
yeah, I was, well, I went to Wilfrid Laurier for 2 years. And because I was
Hmm.
threatened so many times to be killed as a Jew, I ended up moving to York.
And that was 20
Um,
years ago.
That was 20 years ago. Mind you, I was very politically active. I started my own advocacy, Israel Advocacy Club on Laurier's campus. So I was very, outspoken and I was involved. And so I guess you could say I knew what I was getting myself into. Um, at York, it was always just like the boys would fight. There would be like fist fights. I never felt actually unsafe because I had this whole Jew posse that was around me, like to protect me. At Laurier, I felt very, very unsafe because we were like 6 Jews back then. I know that now there's a bigger Jewish community at Laurier. Um, but I think the main difference, and this is, Israelis actually, I was with Agam's parents today, my cousin who's a hostage. I was with her parents in the morning and we were talking about this, about the congressional hearing and all these things. And I said to them, it's amazing how Israelis are talking about this so much this week because they had no idea that there was anti-Semitism in America until the past 2 months. And so that's why Israelis are apologizing because they feel like it's
Hmm.
something new. They feel like it's like, oh my God, because of us and our war, you're now feeling anti-Semitism.
Yes.
They don't know that it's something that really, we've also been, anybody who's involved has been kind of like waving the flags, like signaling this is not going to a good place. We've been saying it for a few years. It's not that it came out of nowhere. But I think the major difference that we're feeling, and this is where the congressional hearing really brought it out, is that 20 years ago when I was on campus, there was anti Semitism, there were protests against Israel. It was all the same, but it was by my peers. Whereas now it's administration backed, it's faculty backed. It's the administration of Penn coming to give burritos to students when they're, you know, demonstrating. It's the and I mean, I think that there's a combination of a few things that have led to this. I'm not going to underestimate the Qatari money and the Saudi money and all that money that's going into these universities, but I don't think that's the reason why. I choose to believe that the institutions have enough integrity that they don't change their moral views and opinions based on external funding. But where I do think the problem, I know, I would hope, but where I think the problem actually rises, and this is like a kind of a theory that I feel like I'm kind of making up right now, like over the past few months. It's something that I'm making up and I'm trying to figure it out. And if I had time to like do a PhD, I would probably do it on that. But I think that the West has reached a point where it's starting to hate itself. The West feels so guilty about all of the crimes against humanity that it has done, and we can't deny that there have been atrocities, and what has happened to Native Canadians and Native Americans, and colonialism and slavery and the oppression of women, and there's been an extreme history of atrocities. But what the West is forgetting, because now they're like trying to like repent for all the sins that they've done, by by canceling Thanksgiving and by all these movements, all these Black Lives Matter and the Me Too movements, and they're great, right? And it's like a way for us to like repent on our sins, I guess, as the West. But we cannot forget, or the West should not forget, also the really amazing things that it has brought to the world, over history, and the fact that yes, maybe many, many years ago, there was slavery and it was awful, but the United States did something about that. There are many places in the world where slavery still exists, where the
But
trade. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, because this really does bring up, and I wanted to talk to you about this, is this whole anti-woke movement right now, that wokeism is initially part of Western culture, and that it's turning itself on its head right now because the far right is coming to attack. Well, it's always the right and the left are always they're always attacking each other. But what's gone on university campuses, specifically in the United States, is kind of rearing this ugly head around wokeism.
Absolutely.
And and it's also doing, I find, that for people who have liberal hearts like myself, have started to really lean. I find myself like being pulled every day. I'm going right, 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 right every single day. And then our prime minister comes out yesterday, and I'm screaming. Like you said, you were repulsed and embarrassed, and I'm screaming, um, because where is the justice? And where I'm finding that there's going to be some major upheaval is that the far left, the woke culture is going to implode, because what we have seen on university campuses make absolutely no sense in regards to what's happening in the Middle East. It makes absolutely no sense. No sense.
Right.
Because
Right.
there's no logic, there's no education around it. It's just pure hate. It comes out as
Well,
hate speech.
the logic that they put to it, which I
Mhm.
can understand because it comes with their own lack of knowledge, as you said,
Yeah.
about the history. But the story they're telling themselves is that Israel is just another European white supremacy ideology colonizer in the Middle East, that Jews are not indigenous to the Middle East, that they should just go back to where they came from, which for them means Europe. And they are so uneducated because clearly, more than 50% of Jews in the world are not of any European connection. We have Morocco and we have Iran and we have Iraq and we have Yemen
Mhm.
and in but I also in some way I blame Israel. And the
Mhm.
reason I blame Israel is because Israel, and I mean, because we were not immune to the same campaigns going on all over the world of wokeism. We were not immune to it as well. And over the past 15 years, I would say, or 17 years since I moved to Israel, more or less, there has been an extreme divide between right and left in Israel, which came to like the heat, to the peak over the past
Yes.
year.
Yes.
And we have been as a society also that internal battle between um the division between like religion and state and all these kind of things. And we've always been trying like the left side, I guess you could say, but even in Israel it's like left and right, or it's hard to say also. But the left side has always been more division of religion and state, and trying to be more like other Western countries and be more like Canada and be more like the United States. But in a Jewish state, that can't work because we are an ethno religion. We're not just an ethno that
Mhm.
happens to have this religion. We are an ethno religion. In Canada, you're, I mean, well, Canada's not a good example because Canada has no ethnicity of its own as well, right? So Canada's not a good example. But if I would take Islam as an example, your religion can be Islam, but your ethnicity can be Arab, it can be Indonesian, it can be North African, um, or
That's a good
in the
point.
same, right?
Mhm.
And
Good, good
and
point.
for Jews, that doesn't exist because
Mhm.
despite the fact that we speak in the way of like, oh, I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, I'm a Sephardi Jew, I'm a Mizrahi Jew, I'm a Moroccan Jew, I'm a Romanian Jew. We say that amongst ourselves because obviously for 2000 years we've adapted the culture, the food, the traditions, and also the external appearance.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, our DNA is all the same and we are one ethnicity. My ethnicity, my great grandparents were born in Romania. I'm not Romanian in my ethnicity. I'm not. And, something that we haven't spoken about, we as Jews haven't spoken about, is why do us Ashkenazi Jews, why do we look the way we look? Is because of years of systematic rape against our women. You know, that's why Jews have looked, European Jews look white, and not all
You
of them
know,
do.
Ashley, when you started to say that, I'm like, I felt like every hair on my neck just went like, I just got the heebie-jeebies when you said that, because part of being Jewish in Canada for me has, I mean, how do I say this properly? And I'm sure you can relate to this. I don't know how many times I have been asked, and here's how it goes. Are you Jewish? Yes, I'm Jewish. Is your mother Jewish? Yes, my mother is Jewish. Are both your parents Jewish? Yes. Well, what about your grandparents? Yes. Well, who isn't Jewish in your family? Everyone's Jewish. Well, what do you mean? Why do you look like that? What do you mean? How do I look? Like
You
it is
don't
the
look
crazy,
Jewish.
it's the craziest conversation. And I've had this
Yeah.
conversation so many times. And one of the things, I know this is disgusting and horrible, but when we started to see pictures of the victims from the music festival, the women particularly, um, there was a little bit of shock from the external community around the way that these young women look. And to me, that is anti-Semitic. That is
Because they don't
wrong.
look because they don't look
Israeli.
Ashkenazi?
Yeah, no,
Oh,
because
okay.
they don't look Sephardic.
Okay.
That they aren't, long, dark, curly hair. That many of them are blonde. They look just like you and I. And it was very off-putting for me. I was like that, having spent time in Israel, having lived a Jewish life, having relatives and friends, I don't look at people as like in a stereotype like that. But that really was very off-putting for me, that there was this idea that there were more um, foreigners in Israel as opposed to Israelis at the festival. And even though, of course, there were tons of visitors, and we know that now, but it was off-putting. It was very upsetting to me to hear
Also,
that.
many
But
people can't forget that, in my opinion, Israel is one of the countries with the most beautiful people in the
oh,
world.
oh my God. Do not get me started. What do you think drew me there summer after summer after summer?
Right.
I was
And
like, my
and the
God.
reason, the reason that really it's such a beautiful country is because of that mix.
Hmm.
And there in 20 or 30 years time, there's probably not going to be any people in Israel who are going to be like, yes, I'm only Moroccan. Like it's not going to
Hmm.
exist anymore. You can even look at my children, for example. My husband is half Iraqi and half Spanish, and I am Romanian and Egyptian. And so the mix of our children is like, it's just such a mix. And that's how every family looks today because our generation was already mixed. And
That's right.
and and so it's just so stupid when people
Isn't it?
assume that Israelis would look a certain way because it's almost like
So
saying
stupid.
Canadian, it's like how people would say how a Canadian would look. There are so many visible minorities, for example, in Toronto, where if I'm not mistaken, more than 50% of Toronto is a visible by part of a visible minority group. It's when there is no such thing anymore as what a Canadian looks like, right? And if somebody would
Exactly.
ever make some kind of commercial on TV of the typical Canadian and would only use like white, people with a toque, they'd be sued for discrimination because that's
Of
not what
course.
Canada looks like anymore.
Of course.
And
And one of the things that makes our country so incredible is that how diverse it is. And that, I chose a neighborhood in Toronto to send my children to a school that was always considered one of the most multicultural schools in the city, even though we live in predominantly a Jewish neighborhood. Even though I go figure, but that's just the school that it is. And they never ever felt anti-Semitism around them. They have friends from every walk of life. They grew up in different homes. Same here. It was never ever really a thing. It was never a thing. I have children in university. I have a child still in high school. And October 7th happens. And I'm telling you, they are beyond freaked out. They're like, they didn't realize that the friends that they have grown up with their whole lives, potentially their parents are anti-Semitic.
Absolutely.
That scares the shit out of them, or
There's
they're
one
close.
person to blame. There's just one person to blame, and it's Trudeau. Because if Hamas is a recognized terrorist organization in Canada, it is illegal to support a terrorist organization in Canada. And so every single one of those people celebrating on the streets on October 8th, this was
Yeah, that was,
before, they can't say this was a rally, a demonstration, a protest.
I
This wasn't
know.
ceasefire. This was before any military response from Israel. Those people
I remember.
celebrating on October 8th, every single one of them should have been in jail. Every single one of them.
That was really, that was a very that was pivotal for me, of course, and for most people. And even I'm so naive, really, because that rally went on the Sunday at City Hall, and everyone was so mad at our mayor for allowing it. And I kept thinking, how is this happening? How is this happening? And even though it did, I thought, okay, ridiculous. It was a rally. This is it. Like it obviously everyone's going to know the truth. I mean, the truth always prevails, and this is what it is. And it went from bad to so much worse and continues to be so much worse that I don't understand how the majority of this planet can't see the truth. I don't understand. And people could be listening to this or watching this and they'll think, well, she doesn't have her facts and she's jaded. She's one side. She has a bias. The facts are the facts. The truth is the truth. I don't understand. And so I hear myself saying that. And as I'm saying it, the rational side of me says, well, of course I understand how the world is seeing it because of propaganda. And the propaganda machine is very real and really fucking scary. Really fucking scary. I want to give you an example. I had an interview last week with a woman who is a huge advocate for the international Jewish community. She's not Jewish herself, but she saw what happened on, of course, October 7th, and then what pursued afterwards, and said she couldn't wrap her head around how the world wasn't rallying for us. She's like, how can we not? And I asked her why she thought so many people in my life have been silent and haven't rallied for me and for my family, for my community. And I was very hurt by it and felt very betrayed. And she said it really stems from fear. People are just afraid to speak out. So I had somebody send me a message after they heard the episode. And this woman had said to me, well, that's all nice that she said that. But you know what? The silent majority in 1939 allowed the Holocaust to prevail. So we can't give anybody a pass right now. And if that sounds too dramatic or too barbaric, I apologize, but that's just really the way it is. So I want to ask you about that, this idea of a silent minority.
I think what hurts the most, I can understand why people are fearful about taking a side because they're afraid of how that might impact their job or that, or even the relationships around them. So I can understand that. And it's just like, I give this example all the time. And this is why I get angry at people making TikTok videos without knowing anything.
Oh my
Because
God, TikTok. Oh my God.
because
I have
I
that written down.
know I know that there has been a genocide in Darfur going on for years. But I know that I don't know enough about it to be vocal and opinionated about it on TikTok. Okay? I also know my own limits and boundaries. Am I the person to go right now? And, there's atrocities all over this world. And every single day, China's doing them, Iran is doing them. For Iran, I've been a little bit more vocal because it affects me as well personally. Like the Islamic regime of Iran affects me personally. Does what's happening in Africa affect me personally? It doesn't. There's even for example, things that are, between the American and Mexican border, there have been things, and it didn't affect me personally. And so there's always a cause that you can speak up against, that you can be vocal, that you can use your platform, that you can use your social media, that I could go out and rally for. Um, it's okay that people say, I don't feel close to this issue. I'm going to sit this one out. I think that's okay. I
Hmm.
would prefer that, much more prefer that than the ones who are like, especially these celebrities who are now like putting up posts of like free Palestine or fundraising for the children of Gaza, which I understand because when you don't know enough about a situation, you think, okay, I'm fundraising for children. How could that ever be a bad thing? Right. But they don't understand where that money goes. They
But
don't.
you know what? Don't you think as a celebrity, they have a responsibility to know what they're saying? As
I,
somebody who has 300 million followers?
I don't, I mean,
I
there
don't
are
know.
some there are some that I know that are lying and they have a responsibility. But again, that's why I'm saying, like, people like Bella Hadid, okay? Obviously, I mean, that's an extreme example. Somebody who's going to decide to be vocal about something and passionate and use their platform and use their voice, they have to be spreading truth. But people who are, I'm going to give Taylor Swift as an example because a lot of people have been talking about her this week.
Are you giving her a pass? Just set me up. Are you giving her a pass? Just need to know where you're going with this. I'm
I
just kidding with
I'm
you. I love
I'm
her, so
giving her
that's
a
why.
pass. I'm
Me
giving
too.
her a pass
Hmm.
because I I could see myself in the same situation as her. She's a
Hmm.
and and I'm not making excuses, but at the end of the day, we are people. When her media and her social media are showing her 24 hours a day about the innocent people in Gaza, and
Hmm.
and it's true. I cannot deny that there are thousands of children dying in Gaza, and it's a tragedy. That's the reality, okay? The reality is, of course, that who is to blame is Hamas, and that's a whole other discussion. But you and I know the details. When a celebrity is just told or sees on her social media all the time, children in Gaza, they have nowhere to live, they've been displaced, they humanitarian
It's
crisis.
horrible.
These are horrible images, and I
Horrible.
think that any decent human being, their first instinct is, especially if they have the money that Taylor Swift has, it's how can I help, right? And she's actually not even fundraising herself. She just went to a comedy show that was to raise money, right? So she's not even heavily involved in herself. She just went to an event that was like a fundraising event. And can I tell you that every single time in my lifetime that I've ever donated to an organization or gone to a fundraising event, did I always do my complete research about everything about that organization? No, because when somebody tells you they're fundraising for saving children's heart, you believe them that they're fundraising for saving children's heart. So that's why I'm giving people like that a pass. It's the ones who do decide to make a statement. For example, the ones who decide to put up a post saying free Palestine or saying save the children of Gaza or whatever. Again, it's those people that I expect to, if you're already going to step your foot into that water, then at least condemn Hamas. At least know what you're
This
talking about.
is okay. So this is what I'm saying about Taylor. We don't talk about Taylor obviously for too long, but this is what I'm saying. She hasn't said a word about anything. She never said one word about October 7th. She didn't say anything. She is a woman's woman. She is always champions the underdog. That is, her that's her thing. And she hasn't said one word about the women, the victims, the women, not one word. So go to your whatever your fundraiser. That's fine. I don't disagree with you at all. But maybe come out with a statement the next day and
Right.
said, I also support the victims,
Right.
like of
Right.
October 7th, and release the hostages, by the way. By the
One
way.
one story of her just writing rape is
Just one.
never okay. It would have
Yeah,
been good. Yeah. That's
fine.
all.
Exact.
Rape is never okay.
And same with Michelle Obama. Just one word, one
Just one
sentence.
word.
Give me one line. You've spent your entire career talking about women's rights. Just give me one line.
Oh, in
why is,
2018, she was the first to hold up a sign for
of
bring back
course,
our girls, right? Save our
of
girls.
course, of course. So, this narrative has been going on now for weeks about, women's rights, except Me Too, unless you're a Jew.
Right.
So it's that is has been very devastating for me. That's been devastating for me. And I can't
It's really,
imagine
really
being in
hard.
it, being in Israel, knowing what's happening on the outside.
It's
That's
really, really
hard.
difficult for me to talk about it because I have a 19-year-old female cousin in Gaza. So it's
Right.
very, very, very difficult for me to talk about that.
Okay.
Um, just to imagine, I just don't even want to get there. And I can
Hmm.
tell you, just from speaking from all my friends, that there is not one woman that did not go through her head at least 5 to 10 times over the past 2 months, picturing herself in that situation. This has created
Ashley,
a lot of sexual issues for a lot of women in Israel as well.
hmm I would
Women don't want to
imagine.
be touched. They don't want to be
I
touched by their loved
I
ones.
imagine. I imagine. I imagine
And
because
it's trauma.
right, and that's the entire country is traumatized. But my friends and I have talked about it too. Like
Yeah.
you just nobody feels that right now.
Yeah.
Um, it's it's devastating. I don't know any other word to describe how devastating that part of
We,
it.
when when I was in Toronto, I actually said something I spoke at an event at the JCC.
You know,
And and the event started with it was a beautiful event, and it started with one of the girls there singing like a really sad song, and then they prayed, and then and like people were like crying, and then I got up to talk. And I said, when I got up to talk, I said, at this very moment, I just realized that I'm more Israeli than I am Canadian. Why? Because this is not the time to cry. We are fucking survivors. And our Israeli spirit right now is like, we're sad and we're heartbroken and we're traumatized and we're afraid and all that. But we look at our IDF and we're just like, we're going to prevail. We're going to win. We always win. We have God on our side. We always have. It's going to be okay. We're strong. We have the greatest nation in the world. We have the greatest high tech in the world. We have the greatest people in the world who came to volunteer and to be there one for. And we're so like pumped also as a country because it's united us. We're stronger than ever. And you don't see Israeli events other than at, the events of the families of the hostages, where there it's like it is very, very sad and solemn and everything. But when you see like everywhere else, everywhere is flags and pride and unity and we got this. And so there's something about that Israeli spirit. And I guess it's because it's a nation that has been living through terror since before it even was, the country was established. It's like that feeling of life goes on. And what's the point of life if we don't make the most out of it? My mom, like she always talks to me about like me spending too much money on handbags and whatever. And I it is always. And after October 7th, like the first thing I said to my mom, and I was like, you see, like, why would I save any money? I live in a country where all I got to do is like travel the world and buy expensive handbags because that makes me feel good. Like that's what makes me feel good. And maybe
Amen.
tomorrow I'm going to die in a terrorist attack. And so at least I'm going
Mm.
to know that I enjoyed those handbags. You know what I mean? Like it's, it really does change your perspective about a lot of things. I see my Canadian friends. There's like, they, people always ask me, how come Israelis are always in minus at the bank? Like, this is why. It's because who knows if I'm going to be alive? Like, I'm not going to save any money.
I should move to Israel. Really, I should have moved to Israel. I love that I'm ending this conversation with you feeling so filled up. Like I feel joy. I'm not feeling that ache, that terrible sadness that I carry around with me all the time. And I love that about you. And I want people to go follow you and to engage with you because your content is, yes, it's advocacy and it's educational, but it is inspirational. Like you are one of
Thank
my
you.
go-to, you are one of my go-tos every day. So tell everybody how they can find you.
So Instagram and YouTube, it's Ashley Waxman Bakshi. TikTok as well, but that's mostly makeup because they take off every single pro Israel video I make.
I know.
But yeah, I've because my following has grown over the past 2 months and it's grown completely in the United States and Canada. So right now, 30% of my followers are actually from the US and Canada. Whereas once my content was always in Hebrew, now it's
Mm-hmm.
90% English, I would say. So I do throw some Hebrew in there, but yeah, I love my followers from abroad. I love being connected with them. And I get a lot of like, I love how you guys, I'm saying you guys for all the like Canadians and Americans listening right now. I love how you guys like send me things that are happening in your communities because sometimes we're very disconnected here in Israel, and I wake up in the morning and the first thing I do is I look at my phone to see like what did I miss in North America while I was sleeping. So yeah,
And
so just
I look at you to see what did I miss in Israel. I love that. That's
yeah,
amazing. I can't
yeah.
wait to tell my friends at Stable Care that I interviewed you. They're gonna be like, "What? Hey," they're gonna think that's so cool. I'll send them a picture of us. But this has been it's been really wonderful connecting with you.
Thank you.
I'm very grateful and very grateful for the work that you do, and just keep doing everything that you're doing because I think you're. Not I think I know you're helping a lot of people get through some very difficult times right now in all ages. Like my kids are watching your stuff too, which is
Oh, that's amazing.
incredible. They're not watching
Thank you
your
so much.
not your beauty stuff, but
Yeah.
your content right now on Instagram and YouTube has been
I
it's
don't
been
think I'm
really
ever going to go back
special.
to doing beauty, to be honest. I think I'm done
Oh,
with it.
shame, shame, shame. I like that too, but okay. Okay. Yeah. I mean, listen,
Yeah.
your calling, you get different callings in life,
Right.
right?
Right.
Different
Right.
iterations in your career. And this has happened for a reason for many people. So
Yes.
fingers
Thank
crossed
you.
as we continue marching on. Please stay in
Thank you
touch.
so
You've been
much.
incredible.
I will. I will. And you too. And next time I'm in Toronto, we have to have a coffee.
Please. Oh my God. Well, we have here, but like a proper coffee. Are you coming
Absolutely.
back anytime soon?
I probably will come, hopefully in the summer or something like that. Yeah.
Okay. I'll let you know if I'm coming to Israel.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thank
Thanks everybody
you.
for listening. Thank you so much.